This shirt that I'm wearing cost me about $630. This is a long sleeve silk Versace Barocco pattern shirt that I bought discounted. Might I remind you, these are about $1,300 brand new. I bought this from a Versace outlet here in Texas, and I bought it because I thought it would make me look cool, and I thought it would make me feel rich and feel happy, and I thought I would derive a lot of pleasure from having this. And I did for about a week or two, maybe. But either way, I grew up. I can remember from an early age being obsessed with designer clothing, being obsessed with luxurious things, right? Whether that was Range Rovers, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, cars, watches, Audemars, Rolexes. I can even remember being like 10 or 11 years old, and going to Remax, which is like a realty website, and looking for houses, right, at like 11 years old, and filtering for like 8,000 square feet and above, um, and just being completely obsessed with all these sorts of material things, right? So I kind of wanted to make a video. I might make a series. I'm not quite sure yet, but just kind of talking about materialism because I grew up and realized that um, it's a trap, and it's programmed into us from a very young age. Um, and I went through my own sort of thing, right? I moved out and moved into a high rise, and lived the life, and bought the clothes, and bought the shoes and the sunglasses, and went to the excuse me, went to the fancy places, and had my dinners, and you know paid for trips that I couldn't afford. And it was all stupid, and it was very, very empty. And now I don't really care about any of that stuff, and I realize that I really don't care about material things, and I'm really not necessarily motivated to make tons of money so I can just buy things. And I'm happier now. I really am. I feel. I don't know. It's strange. I feel like it's materialism, right? Is a sickness. Um, right. So just I guess for the for the sake of this recording. Sorry, I heard somebody in the other room coughing. For the sake of this recording, we'll just refer to the definition of materialism as deriving one's happiness from the things that you own, or like your possessions, right? So your happiness is tied to the quality of the things you own, and how many things that you own, so on and so forth, right? Well, where does this come from? If you look in the Bible, for example, right, there's all kinds of different talks about materialism, and greed, and those sorts of things, right? The Bible says, I don't remember exactly which verse it is, but the Bible says that the love of money is the root of all evil. And I kind of believe that. Not that like having money is the root of all evil, but the obsession and the love with money. So you know, it's it's a it's something that's been going on, I guess, since the dawn of time, right? Um, you can look at it. Excuse me, guys. I don't know why. Give me one second. There we go. Just had like some phlegm or something in my throat there. Um, if you look philosophically, and you could say that it traces back to the idea of hedonism, right? Philosophers like Aristippus and Epicurus, kind of founding the idea of hedonism, right? Which, if you don't know what hedonism is, it's basically the idea that it's a philosophy that the ultimate moral and the ultimate aim of life is to maximize the amount of pleasure that you experience, and thus minimize the amount of pain. So you could say that consumerism and materialism is deeply tied and connected with that sort of thing, and that's thousands of years old. More on that later. Culturally and economically, you could say maybe it starts with the industrial revolution, right, where we go from making things or buying things from people that, and having them handmade to now we're able to mass produce things, and so there's more items and materials in circulation, so it becomes like a game, and you see other people with certain things, so then now you want to buy them. um, you know it, it could have started there, or that definitely could have accelerated the the influence that materialism and consumerism has had. Or you could fast forward to like post World War II. We experienced, especially in the West after the war, experienced a ton of economic growth. And that was kind of, think about when TVs and radio and then advertising really and media started becoming a thing. Big time, widely available, and so advertisers are trying to make money, and so advertising becomes a big thing. And so maybe that you know spawned another acceleration or evolution of materialism and consumerism. And then you fast forward to 2025. um, I was doing some googling, and I saw a couple different like reports and you can look this up, that they predict, like people have done, I guess, studies, and they estimate that the average American, or maybe it's just the average person, I guess you have to be probably in a developed country, but let's just say the average person in America sees between 4,000 and 10,000 advertisements in a day, which is mind-boggling that is the number that you can find when you go and look that thing up, that sort of a thing up on the internet. But I mean, think about it. Like, it's all over. You go to Instagram, you might see 30 ads, within 10 minutes scrolling. You walk down the sidewalk, there's people that have hats on with ads on them, there's shirts that have brands on them, cars with bumper stickers, there's the radio, there's your podcast, TV, there's at the doctor's office, there's magazines, billboards everywhere, etc., etc. So yeah, I mean, it probably is between 5,000 and 10,000, something like that. That's kind of hard to wrap your head around. So I mean, it's basically everywhere, and it's been happening since the dawn of time, right? It's this obsession with material possessions and wealth, and so it kind of makes me think, like, why do we get sucked into this trap? Is it human nature? Is it something that the government tries to do to control us? I don't know. I have no clue. Maybe it's just the way that humans are. I maybe think that that's more the case, but I don't know. I could see it definitely being a control mechanism as well. But going back to hedonism, right? Advertisers and stuff realize that you know people buy things that they're emotionally attached to, and so they make a commercial about something and they tell you, like, if you buy this certain thing, it's going to make you happy, or it's going to make you enjoy your life better, it's going to make you relax, etc., etc., etc. So they're tying advertisements to positive emotions, right? The pleasure aspect, right? Maximizing your pleasure, right? If you buy the newest fragrance or the newest makeup or whatever, it's going to make you fall in love, or whatever. Um, you know, Also, there's the dopamine side of things, right? Buying things gives you a little surge of dopamine because it's a novelty pleasure, right? You get a little hit of something, new, something variety, a new shirt, it's a collection for you or whatever. So you get a spike of dopamine, right? People get addicted to shopping the same way that they get addicted to gambling and, alcohol or whatever. It can be pleasurable, but it's a short-lived pleasure, right? It's a small, spike of dopamine in terms of like the long-term happiness. Then you have social media, right? everybody's flaunting their new watch that they, I'm not wearing a watch, but everybody's making their picture with their new car when they get it or whatever, or the new motorcycle, or their new outfit of the day, blah 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 blah, and then they tag the brands that they bought it from, etc., etc. You know, and then you could go really down the rabbit hole, which is kind of what I like to do. There's the evolutionary aspect, which you think of back in thousands of years ago, right? For example, resources were more so thought of as water, food, shelter, fire, and maybe like I don't know, very very simple tools or something, right? Fast forward today, like all that stuff's taken care of. For most people in developed countries, we have shelter, we have water, we have food. We don't have to worry about those things. And so resources, the definition of what we think of resources, you could say now we can include resources to be Versace Barocco pattern T-shirts and Oakley sunglasses, right? Or whatever. And so evolutionarily speaking, you have resource acquisition as a key indicator of survival. So maybe that's still a part of our limbic system, and something kind of like fight or flight, right? We don't really need, I mean, we still have fight or flight, but like it's not so much used for running away from tigers and bears anymore. And it's become a thing where people have anxiety attacks because they're still having this response that they shouldn't have, because there's either way, I'm sort of rambling there. The other side of the evolutionary thing is resource, abundance and resource acquisition is a signal of success, and as a is a key. Let's say, how can I say this? Having resources indicates that you're a viable mate to a woman or to a man or whatever, right? You see it modern, right, where people are like, oh, they want to date the person who has the nice job and the money, and you see all kinds of crazy videos on Instagram of people, they go, I only date somebody who makes this much money, or they got to drive this car, or whatever. So there's that aspect, right, as well. Whereas in the past, it signaled like, I have all these resources, so if you have a child with me, the child won't die. Because if you have a child with those guys over there in that tribe, they don't really have a lot of water, and they don't know how to get food, and they don't know how to make axes, and they haven't figured out how to cut down mangoes as well as I can, right? But nowadays it's like they don't have the cool watch and the fancy dinners and the first class flights that I have. So it's a similar thing. So I mean that could be part of it as well. I can definitely talk more about that, later in a subsequent video, but just kind of tying everything together, right? I mentioned very briefly at the beginning, of the video, that my experience was I thought that having a bunch of stuff would make me really, really happy, and I thought that I would move to a big city, which I did, and live in a high rise, which I did, with the floor to ceiling type windows, which I did. Pay for trips, take people to the beach, which I did. Buy the designer shit, right? I bought this Versace shirt, a Gucci loafers, a Balenciaga belt. I bought a Louis Vuitton wallet. I bought like 25 bottles of fragrances, different colognes. I bought Prada sunglasses, so etc. etc. Right? Just because it was all these sorts of material things, and it just never, ever, ever really made me feel any sort of way. And then I started looking for jobs to make more money. Even though I was making good money, I started looking for other jobs to make more money, and I started making more money. And I realized, that I really didn't like the job that I was doing. And I was just doing the job to get more money, to buy more stuff that didn't make me happy. And so I realized that there was a cycle, right? And then I realized that a lot of these people that are around me living in this high rise, um, and and going to doing these things, like they all look like zombies and robots. Like they just were sucked into this matrix, if you will, right? And it was never ending, and it was all about who's cooler and who, and it was sickening, right? To me, it was. Um, so I had a change of plans. I said, you know, when my lease is up, I'm gonna move back in with people that I enjoy being around. I'm gonna save some money. I'm gonna do the right thing. I'm gonna look at different ways to um, go for happiness, because this is a very I don't know what you say. It's a it's an empty it's an empty pursuit. We'll just put it like that. And then I started realizing that wow, maybe I'm not motivated by money. Maybe I'm motivated by my passion. Maybe I'm motivated by mastering a skill. Maybe I'm motivated by dating or romance or family or relationships or um, martial arts or music or whatever, right? And I think that I had to go through all that, and you hear about it from like billionaires and stuff, right? Like I think Elon Musk um, is like pretty. It's pretty well known. I think that he like doesn't really own a bunch of stuff, right? He just has these. I mean, he owns his companies, but like he doesn't flaunt his Lamborghinis and whatever. Like he lives in a small house in Texas somewhere. I mean, he's got a private jet and stuff, but that's not. It's not because he wants to be cool. I don't think it's more so like a time thing, right? You don't have to worry about going. And I mean, the guy's one of the most famous people on earth, so going through the airport probably sucks. But yeah, you look at him and you look at. I've heard a lot of people just watching Wade Houston talk about this really really fascinating guy. And he was talking about how he finally got to the point where he thought he would be happy, and he had the cars and the girls, and he had the parties and the $1,000 lunches and whatever, and he just still felt empty. So it's a trap, and beware. Maybe we'll break this down more in a separate video. But until then, mm, just I guess learn to think for yourself and beware beware of the trap that is materialism.